You are listening to the 2 and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
And we are in springtime, near the end of April, so I guess that just means it is time for the CFL Draft. I'm Travis Curra, Sheldon Jones is here, and John Hodge of 3DownNation.com. This seems to be a very busy time for you, John, so thanks for making time for us.
Hey, happy to do it, Trav. Thanks for having me.
So it's been... there have been a few controversial stories this offseason, so I don't want to ignore those. I guess we'll go with the most recent one. It's the Shawn Lemon story. He has been suspended indefinitely by the CFL not a week after announcing his retirement. Now, I think we figured out why he announced his retirement, but there's a lot of supercharged language surrounding this. I've seen certain people calling him disgusting and he's not going to get in the Hall of Fame and all this sort of stuff. Do you think we'll ever see him on the field again? And will he be in the Hall of Fame in the near future? What do you think about this whole thing?
I mean, the precedent set when it comes to Hall of Fame voting, and not in particular for the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, but just in general, seems to be, if you ask, Pete Rose or people of that ilk, is they don't get in, right? And so I think it's entirely possible that a guy like Lemon, who, if you just go based off of his production and, everything that he achieved through his career, who otherwise would have gotten in, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't let him in. I don't think disgusting is the right word. I think phenomenally stupid is the right word. And I've talked to Shawn Lemon multiple occasions. He's a smart guy. I'm not saying he is stupid because he is smart. I think he had post-career, goals of potentially going into player personnel scouting. I know that, he went from team to team early in his career and that turned some people off. But I think he really, as people, he was showered with praise when he first announced his retirement. And I was like, man, this is a guy who really recuperated his image, really overcame, I think, some of the negative connotation of things he either did or said early in his career. And a lot of teams really would take his feedback seriously and full testament to his abilities on the field and also in the locker room, leadership-wise, for what he helped the Alouettes achieve this past season. That team was completely different once he arrived on the scene. But this was an incredibly stupid thing to do, right? Reportedly, the bet that he placed was about $100 Canadian, and that's going to end up costing him, most of the $130,000 he was supposed to earn this year, plus any potential earnings beyond that. Plus, one would think any potential future employment with CFL teams, because I don't see a team hiring him in a front office role now with this on his record. Now, he is fully within his right to appeal this, and I don't believe Lemon has publicly admitted to any wrongdoing, though, again, reportedly, he has told people that the amount of the bet was around $100 Canadian. So we'll see. Do I see him in the Hall of Fame? No. Do I see him on the field again? Maybe. He's within his right to appeal, as all players are when it comes to disciplinary measures. But yeah, ultimately, I wouldn't call it disgusting. I would just call it stupid, because this is a smart, talented person who made a very stupid decision.
The other story of the offseason has, of course, been Chad Kelly of the Toronto Argonauts. Where we stand right now, are we just kind of in a wait and see what the investigation brings forward, or what's the latest on that?
I mean, there's really been no formal updates. The last kind of new thing was a couple weeks ago. We at 3DownNation reported that there had been additional filings added to the lawsuit from the plaintiff. That occurred, I want to say, around 3 weeks after Randy Ambrosie addressed this publicly for the first and only time. Like, he didn't talk to the media about this. I don't know, more than that now, 4 or 5 weeks even, because that was pre-CFL Combine. He did not address the media at the CFL Combine. He's not spoken to the media since. All he said is we're conducting an investigation. The investigation's being done by an independent party. We haven't told that party to conclude anything or put up any guardrails. I've had sources indicate that members of the Argonauts have, in fact, worked with this independent body that is conducting the review. So the review is taking place, but there's been no formal update as to when this review will be done. One thing I do want to point out is I saw some tweets from people saying, wow, well, the league was really quick to throw Shawn Lemon out and they still don't have a conclusion of the Chad Kelly situation. It's like, well, hold on. The Shawn Lemon betting scandal, if you want to call it that, stems from 2021. So this is a 3-year development. Now, it's unclear from the league when they caught wind that Lemon was potentially betting money on games, how long it took to verify that. They claim they have inconclusive or a fully indisputable evidence that he did do it. But the point is, it was apparently a 3-year process for Lemon. Now, is Kelly going to be a 3-year process? No. I would think the league wants this to come to a conclusion before the season, but we don't have a formal update. All we know is that the Argos are preparing as though Kelly will be their starter in 2024 at this time, and we'll have to wait and see. But again, I would think if I'm the CFL, from a PR relations standpoint, from a clarity standpoint, you'd want this, figured out, because we're basically 2 weeks away from camp. And if this is still hanging over everybody by the start of camp, it's probably not in the best interest of the CFL, the Argos, or anybody. But it's also tough to rush an investigation because they're also under pressure to take the allegations seriously and be fair to all parties involved, because you can't rush this and get it wrong. You got to do it right. So it's a tricky situation for sure.
The NFL draft has gone down, and there's just a lot of CFL-related news and Canadian-related news when it came to the draft, including one UBC Thunderbird got drafted. Giovanni Manu gets drafted in the 4th round, and Theo Benedict, his teammate, signs with the Chicago Bears. Around the Vanier Cup time, there was a lot of talk about the strength of that offensive line of the Thunderbirds. What's the prospect of these guys having some success in the NFL?
Well, I mean, the super impressive one was Manu. Like Giovanni not only got picked, but he got picked in the 4th round, and he got picked by a team in the Detroit Lions that I think, has a reputation for developing guys and going out of their way to take high character players. And they also traded up to get him. They give up a 3rd round pick in next year's draft, in the 2025 draft, to take Manu in the 4th round of this year's draft. So to me, that has essentially negated his CFL draft stock. Like before the draft, it was like, well, Manu could be maybe he's a 6th round guy. I talked to Manu the day before he got picked, and I said, where's your agent telling you you're going to go? And he said early day 3, which would be like round 4, round 5. Lo and behold, that information aged very well. He did in fact go round 4. And so to me, if I'm a CFL team, it's like bare minimum you're waiting 3 full years to see Giovanni Manu. If we ever see him in the CFL, it's like 2027. So to me, he's like now probably a 7th or 8th round pick. He's going to be with the Lions, I would think, for minimum 2 years with that type of investment. And he's a really high character, super freakishly athletic for his size guy. If you look up pictures of Giovanni Manu at his pro day, he looks like he weighs 295 pounds, but in reality, he weighs 352. When I spoke to him, I said, hey, do teams believe you when you say you weigh 352? And he said that oftentimes, no, they didn't believe him. And I believe a number of teams, because he visited 11 teams between his pro day in late March and the draft. I believe a number of those teams actually weighed him in-house just to verify his weight, because he is so lean and so athletic for his size. So Manu, I would say his CFL stock is plummeted. Theo Benedict, maybe the opposite. And I'll say this. I think right now Theo Benedict is the better player. He's the 2-time JP Metros Trophy winner as the top down lineman in U Sports football. And to me, I think he's maybe a little better suited to the Canadian game. Manu has heavier feet. Benedict was actually recruited to a number of NCAA programs as a tight end coming out of high school. He committed to the Thunderbirds at 250 pounds, and he has slowly built his frame up to approximately 295, where it is now. He's somebody who he signed with the Bears. He reportedly got about $100,000 guaranteed as an undrafted guy. But there was also a lot of speculation that he'd get drafted, and he didn't. So to me, Benedict's stock in the CFL is probably up a little bit, because if he gets picked, he probably doesn't go earlier than round 4 in the CFL draft. As a UDFA, he could maybe sneak into the bottom of the second round, certainly into the third round. And I think maybe the timeline for a guy like that, instead of, oh, well, we thought we'd have to wait 3, maybe now we're only waiting 1 or 2 for a guy like Theo Benedict. If you're only waiting a year or 2 for a player of that caliber, there's no reason not to take him relatively high.
This Quantez Stigger story of the Argos getting drafted in the 5th round by the New York Jets. This is such a unique situation. Have you ever really seen anything like it where a guy plays in the CFL and then gets drafted in the NFL? That can only mean good things for the CFL's perception elsewhere, right?
I think so. And I mean, he's a unique situation, right? He never played college football for reasons that I think are well documented at this point, with some personal challenges, losing his father, that type of thing. But I mean, it's a wonderful story. I got to meet Quantez. I was covering an Argos Alouettes game in September this past season in Montreal, and I spent a little bit of time at the Argos hotel. And Quantez's size, when I met him in person, like I'm pretty tall. I'm about 6'1.5", and Quantez, when he walked into the room, he felt like an NFL corner. Like, he is a true 6 foot. He feels thick, but like in an athletic way. He's not lanky like some CFL DBs are, just because obviously in the CFL you have to cover so much room. Generally, our DBs are a little smaller than they would be in the NFL. He didn't feel like that. He felt like an NFL corner, and he's shy. Like, he's not a big personality. But I do think that he's going to have a lot of success. And I mean, he went in the 5th round to the New York Jets. 5th round pick. That's, you're not a first rounder, but I think that at that point, you're in the building for probably 2 years. And I mean, we've all seen Quantez play. I mean, he's only 22. He's younger than a lot of guys in the draft, yet he's already got a full year of professional football under his belt. I remember the press release back in, I believe it was January 2023, when the Argos signed him, and the only information you could find on Quantez Stiggers online was from the fan-controlled football league. Wow! And needless to say, the information from that website did not look very official. It was very hard to figure out, is this serious? Is this not? Like what a weird signing. It felt almost like one of those signings that a team will do just for the PR that accompanies it. And it became extremely clear once he hit the field, this is not a PR move. This guy is a baller, and he is unbelievable. And his potential, if he takes this seriously, is sky high. If you ask anybody on the Argos coaching staff, he took everything seriously. He worked his tail off. He's worked his tail off since he was in high school, and it obviously paid off. So it's a wonderful story for him. It's a wonderful story for his family. He's got a young child of his own. Like, he's already started a family of his own. And obviously, he's already achieved a lot, and I think he's going to achieve more.
We've seen the final CFL Scouting Bureau rankings. They came out last week. Were there any players, and we've all already talked about a few of those, offensive linemen from UBC, but there's also been a handful of other guys that have signed as undrafted free agents in the NFL. Are there some other guys that are going to fall in the CFL draft a little bit because they got NFL looks?
Well, I mean, the 3 UDFAs, we've got Kyle Hergel. We'll talk about him first. Kyle Hergel, I broke that signing. He did not receive a lot of guaranteed money from the New Orleans Saints. I actually think that helps his CFL stock. I think he goes in the 1st round. He's also so good. To me, if Kyle Hergel plays in the CFL, he is going to have a Brendan Labatt type career. I believe he is that good out of Boston College. He is a plug-and-play starter. I believe there are multiple guards in the CFL who are going to start in 2024 who are not as good as Kyle Hergel is right now. He is that good. And he's, by the way, I believe 25, turning 26. So he is not a developmental player. He is an older player who's played a ton of college snaps and dominated everywhere he's been, and been an all-conference player everywhere he's been, whether it was North Dakota, whether it was he finished up at Boston College, and in the middle he was at Texas State. He was actually a teammate of Liam Dobson for a year in Texas State. And Liam Dobson, of course, likely to start at left guard for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers this year. He's a former 3rd overall pick. They're still very good friends, very close from what Kyle told me. So Hergel's stock, I think, is up. Anam Dankwa, we'll see. He signed with the Philadelphia Eagles. Dankwa is probably the biggest player in this draft. He might have been the biggest player in the NFL draft, 6'8", 353, but does not move like Giovanni Manu. Slow feet, needs to shed weight. He's somebody who is 11th on the Scouting Bureau rankings right now. And to be completely frank, it really illustrates why these rankings are garbage, because Anam Donko will not be a top 20 pick in this draft. That's not to say he can't be a good player, but he's somebody who I see going in probably round 3 at the earliest and could fall beyond that. And when I call the rankings garbage, please note that Johnny Augustine was on the rankings back in 2017 when he went undrafted, right? Cattell Assay was in the top of the rankings in his draft year, and I believe it was 2021 when he went in the 7th round. Like, these rankings are they need to be taken with a grain of salt. I actually really like the top half of the rankings. I think the top half are pretty legit. The second half of the rankings, the bottom half, I do not like as much. So to me, this is that's how the UDFAs will go. And then the guys who are drafted, yeah, their stock is going to fall, simply because when a guy gets picked and a team invests a draft selection, you're not seeing him for a while. So that's kind of my take, at least on where the stock of the NFL guys sits right now.
Well, were there any guys that, the rankings, quote unquote, garbage? Were there any guys that aren't noted there that maybe they've gained a little bit of momentum in the winter, especially since the combine? Has there been any guys that are starting to move up and get a little bit more attention ahead of draft day?
Well, and by the way, just to take people behind the scenes a little bit. So these rankings are conducted by the league, and they are created essentially by asking scouts and personnel people to rank their players and send in ballots. And obviously there's zero incentive for anybody to be honest about their rankings. There's every incentive to lie, because if you put guys high who you don't actually like, you might be able to, put some doubt into somebody else's mind, or, it's all gamesmanship. So that's why these rankings will never be a true reflection of the top 20. And the other thing I don't like about the top 20 is the fact that the top few players don't get drafted, or if they do, they go in the very late rounds of the draft. Like, Isaiah Adams deserves to be the number 1 player, but it's confusing for your average fan when they go, wait a minute, the top ranked player was an offensive lineman named Isaiah Adams. Why did he get taken in the 7th round? And it's like, well, because he was a 3rd round pick to the Arizona Cardinals, and he's almost certainly never playing in the CFL. So it's confusing from that perspective. 2 players who need to be on the top 20 should be on the top 20 right now and aren't. One of them is George Una, offensive lineman out of the University of Windsor. Una is a guy who was actually a walk-on to the Lancers back in, I think it was 2019. It was certainly pre-pandemic. And that's right when the Lancers were really in the toilet, a program that was really, really, really struggling. And he was part of kind of their rejuvenation. The Lancers won a home playoff game, I believe, for the first time in 48 years this past season, almost 50 years. And he was a huge part of an offensive line that really paved the way in the run game. They had, I think, the 3rd ranked rushing game in all of youth sports. But Una, as a very athletic guy, 6'2", 313, one of the top testing offensive linemen at the combine, sees himself as more of a pass blocker. He did miss the 2021 season due to torn ACL. Had previously played tackle, but played at guard this past season. That's where I think he'll play in the CFL. He's somebody who I think will certainly go in the top 2 rounds of the draft, could even be a 1st round pick, but is not on the top 20. Another player who should be on the top 20 and is not is Benjamin LaBrosse, defensive back, formerly of McGill. And the reason I say formerly of McGill is he actually didn't play this past season due to academic issues, but in 2022 was a 1st-team U Sports All-Canadian at corner. Started his career at Syracuse, where he played a ton of special teams. And at 6 foot 189, he ran a 4.51 at the combine in Winnipeg, which tied for the best time there. That is faster than almost every corner in the CFL who's active. And his broad jump was 11 feet and 2 inches. Like, he is an unbelievably explosive athlete. Those are numbers that would have been above average for the NFL combine, and yet he is not on the rankings, despite having played at a super high level against high level competition. at least by U Sports standards in the RSEQ, going up twice a year against, Montreal, against Laval, against these teams. And he's one of the best athletes in the draft, but he's not in the top 20, which makes no sense whatsoever. So those are two names to watch: Benjamin Labrosse, George Una. They should both be in the top 20, and they are not.
What kind of draft class are we looking at here? It does seem like there's already been some offensive linemen that have had success, and that feels a little bit different from the last couple years talking about the draft. Seems like there's some high pedigree guys when it comes to the O-line.
Well, it really is a blue chip class when it comes to the talent level as a whole, but certainly on the offensive line. And that's partly due to the fact that, with COVID, what they allowed players to do at the NCAA level was essentially stay an extra year, right? Everybody got an extra level, a year of eligibility, and a lot of players took it. And then at the U Sports side, they allowed players to opt out of the CFL draft for an extra year. And so by kind of artificially lengthening those collegiate careers, what it's done is it's pushed extra talent kind of further down the line. So a lot of these players have played extra college. They've gotten extra coaching, which makes them at a higher level. They're also older, right? Like there are guys in this class who are coming out at 24, 25. There's a couple even 26-year-olds. It's a lot easier to come in and compete at the professional level when you're 24, 25. Rather than, some guys who come out like here's a stat for you, Travis, which is amazing. So Tyson Philpott, the reigning most outstanding Canadian in the Grey Cup, is 23 years old. He is 2 years younger. 2 years younger than a lot of players in this year's draft. Logan Bandy, who just retired after 2 years with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, is younger than Kyle Hergel, who's available in this year. So what kind of passing the buck with COVID has done is, now that we're kind of close to the end of these extra years, is it's created a bumper crop, right? Because guys who would naturally be coming out in 2024 are coming out, but a bunch of guys who would have been coming out in 2023 are coming out now. So it's a great class. I've talked to people who think it's the best in 10 years. Some people think it's the best in longer.
Wow.
I talked to Chris Jones at the Combine. He said in a normal year, there's maybe 6, 7 offensive linemen who you want. He said this year there's 12. So yeah, it's certainly a deep group, and it's a good thing, right? Because part of the challenge I think the CFL had during the pandemic is a lot of players who maybe, had really interesting opportunities off the field, took them, right? They retired, and a bunch of the guys who would normally come up through the draft and replace those veterans stayed in school. So we've had kind of a challenge where, okay, we had an influx of people leaving, and then we didn't get that influx of players coming through the pipeline. This year, the dam has kind of burst, and I think we're going to see a lot of these young Canadians do exceptional things in the long term. Now, the first year for a lot of these players will, be a lot of, PR, special teams, rotating, whatever. But I think when you look back at this draft in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, even the casual CFL fan will be like, oh, that guy's so good. Like, man, how'd he go in the second round? Or like, oh, really? That guy was how did that guy go in the third round? Like, he's so good. Like, it's going to be one of those. And the league needs it, again, for reasons that aren't really, the fault of anybody. It's just the way things worked with the pandemic. So yeah, I'm excited to see a lot of this talent come up and get taken and flourish.
Is this going to be the final draft like this, where we're seeing some older guys, or is this going to be like this for another year or two?
I mean, I think we will get at least somewhat of a kind of a spillover into next year, just because there are still some people who opted out of this year's draft. Like Darian Newell is a sensational defensive lineman who plays in the OUA. He's at Queens. He should have been in this draft. He decided to opt out. So there is a bit of a spillover. Another one who actually most of your listeners probably know of is Curtis Rourke, quarterback and younger brother of Nathan Rourke. He decided to use his extra year of eligibility in the NCAA. He actually transferred to Indiana to play a higher level of competition, now at a Power 5 school after previously playing at Ohio, which is also, of course, where Nathan played collegiately. So I do think that this is a bit of a wave that will carry into next year. Will it be as strong next year as this year? I I'd be surprised, but I suppose you never know. I'll have to take a closer look over the next year to kind of compare. But certainly, yes, there is some talent that, again, under normal circumstances would have come out this year, didn't. So yeah, there'll be at least some type of spillover. I don't see next year being a poor draft. I see next year being, certainly solid and perhaps as good or better than this year.
Well, this is pretty exciting news for 2024, and looking forward to seeing those new Canadians on the field. The Edmonton Elks drafting first on Tuesday. I think kind of predicting what a Chris Jones team is going to do is a bit of a fool's errand. But, I mean, there's always seems to be like some, kind of off the board guys where did that come from? Every single year without fail. Are there any of those that you personally are looking at?
In terms of crazy off the board picks?
Yeah. I like those.
Question. I'll say this. I wrote a column talking about essentially when it comes to the draft, right? There's the opportunity for some players to opt in if they get their Canadian citizenship.
Yeah.
One player like that was Antonio Alfano, who was really notable because he was once I believe, a top 5 prospect in the United States coming out of high school. Like, he was ranked ahead of a number of guys who are currently in the NFL. Like, I think he was ranked ahead or near, like, some of the names were like Kool-Aid McKinstry and like guys who got taken this year or have been high round picks in the last couple of years. Sauce Gardner, maybe. I'd have to double check my reporting from a few weeks ago. It turns out his mother was born in Toronto, so he could enter the CFL as a Canadian. However, source indicated that he did not complete his paperwork in time for the draft, so he will not be in the draft. But it's possible that he could be, and somebody like that. And by the way, he originally committed to Alabama. Never ended up playing. He transferred, and Nick though his dad kind of came on his behalf to refute the claim by Nick Saban. Nick Saban accused him of quitting on the team at Alabama. He transferred to Colorado, had some medical issues, didn't play there, was also suspended for a time, transferred to a community college called Independence, and didn't play there. So eventually he played in 2023 for the first time at a school called Lackawanna College. They're a junior college program. He only played 5 games. This is somebody who was once one of the top players in the U.S. Only ever played 5 collegiate games ever, and he did so at the junior college level. But obviously was once considered, the best in sliced bread. So he'd be, I suppose, a good example of a guy who maybe in next year's draft could be a super off the board type of pick, but no, he will not be in this year's draft because he did not get his paperwork in from what I was able to learn.
Now, of course, this is right now at this point of the season to many CFL fans, they're just names, and then sometimes by October you go, hey, this guy had a pretty darn good year, whether they're starting on specials or contributing there all season long before finally getting a spot in the starting defense or the starting lineup. Are there guys that you could see just making an impact right out of the gate here in 2024 as far as this strong draft class goes?
Absolutely. Right now I've got Joel DeBlanco, linebacker out of Cincinnati, going 1. He's 26. He's older because he did use extra eligibility during COVID, but he also just got his Canadian citizenship this offseason. So he spent time with the Seattle Seahawks, the New Orleans Saints, and in the USFL as a starter. And I think, projects certainly as a starter in the CFL. The reason he is or was learned to be Canadian is because the Ottawa Red Blacks wanted to sign him as an American. And it became, his dad is Canadian, and the Blanco family kind of hails from Edmonton, which is a nice fit for the Elks if he is indeed the first overall pick. He's a guy who's going to be, I think, a game wrecker on special teams and will, I think, have an Alex Singleton-like career where even by Labor Day of his rookie season is starting. He is a true sideline to sideline middle linebacker. He can cover, he can run, he can do anything that you ask, I think, of a CFL middle linebacker. Multiple sources have told me he could be a day one starter. I think he'll be starting games regardless of whether he ends up in Edmonton or not this season. Kevin Mattel, I think a rare guy who right out of U Sports could start. I've mocked him at number 2 overall to Ottawa. Kevin Mattel scored, I think it was 22 touchdowns in 20 career U Sports games, which is it's a pretty good average, like a Milt Stegall type average of more than a touchdown a game. To me, if he was on the Ottawa Redblacks right now, he would be their best Canadian receiver. No disrespect to, Keaton Bridgeling or Daniel Oladejo, guys who they've drafted and developed there. But to me, he is the perfect replacement for Nate Behar, who the Redblacks cut early in this offseason to avoid a roster bonus. And then on the offensive line, I mean, again, if Kyle Hergel plays in the CFL this year, to me, he is a pretty much a plug and play starter. Nathaniel Demelin-Duguay out of Laval, he played center and guard at Cégep Rimouski before committing to Laval, where he played left tackle with the Rouge et Or. So to me, he projects as a CFL guard or center, but he's played all 3 spots. He's a super athletic guy. He's ready to be a 6 offensive lineman right now. Could probably start for the second half of the season. Nick Mardner, 6'6" receiver, finished his collegiate career at Auburn. To me, he can be a day one starter, certainly at field side wideout. There are multiple players who can come in and I think start. And there's probably, of the 5 I just mentioned, there's probably another 10 to 15 who, after again rotating and playing specials for a year, could be starters in 2025. So it's that deep of a group, and I think these are guys who will become household names. I mean, no draft is perfect. Some of these guys, for whatever reason, injuries, whatever, won't pan out. That's just what happens with any draft in any league. But I think a lot of these guys who go, especially in the top 2 rounds, are going to be players who fans get to know well over the next couple of years.
We're about 2.5 weeks away from training camp opening, and it looks like Milt Stegall wants to be on the field for at least one, which of course it's a stunt, but hey, he looks like he's in great shape. I'm eating Walby burgers at, Princess Auto Field, and he looks like he's ready to get back on the field. So good for him. That'll be fun to see anyway. But John Hodge of 3DownNation.com, thanks for coming on the show and providing us with your expertise as we get ready for another CFL season, John.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for coming on the show. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Tune Out in your favorite podcatcher and on YouTube. Good contribution, Sheldon Jones.
Call me Silent Bob this episode, man. It's all good.
And we'll talk to you after the draft.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.